Hello, 80-bit pod smashers of the internet, and welcome to another episode of
80-bit pod smash.
I screwed that whole intro all the way up. We
It's
are
all
where
good.
gaming goes to grab a beer.
Power through. We are your hosts, Penguin and Termite. I am Penguin.
I am Termite, and we are a weekly video game podcast smashing together ideas that you care about with video games.
That's right. And tonight we are basing this episode off of, originally it was a different article you sent me, but then you're like, no, I like this one better because it's on PlayStation's website. But this episode
Not why
is
I sent it to you.
This,
Make it sound like, oh, this one's on PlayStation's website, so it's better.
No. But it's on PlayStation's website, and it's a glossary of commonly used video game terms, like in the culture. And we wanted to not necessarily go through the list and talk about the list like we did our Wikipedia episode, but we wanted to talk about the idea of like a glossary of games and video game terminology and why it's both simultaneously important and unimportant. So we'll get to that and why I think that it is. And we'll get to that and more, but we are where gaming goes to grab a beer. So what are you drinking tonight?
I am continuing my journey through other Oktoberfests than Sam Adams. So instead of just getting that Costco pack of Sam Adams Oktoberfest like I enjoy every year, I decided to pick up different breweries. This week's is Aleworks from Williamsburg, Virginia.
Ooh, yeah. Good
They don't make junk. They're one of my favorite breweries as well. And I'm so bummed. I have a sticker for them, had a sticker for them for my water bottle last time I had went. And I left it in the 6-pack box when I threw away the 6-pack box. This was like a year ago or so, maybe two.
Okay.
And I haven't been back there since. But anyway, I digress. This is their Oktoberfest German-style fest beer. And it is packed full of flavor. There's nothing actually like on the can to read, unfortunately. But it's really sweet. That's what I've noticed. But in that, like, I guess, what do you use to make a fest beer? Whatever kind of wheat is in there. You can tell that there's a lot of it.
Nice.
So yeah, it's full-bodied. It's
yeah.
sweet. You had a couple what?
I was gonna say I had a couple of Oktoberfest too, but I'm saving them for later. One of them is not Sam Adams.
Nice.
Yeah, I did not grab that this time because this time I wanted to grab a holler at your direction. I wanted to grab a little Bold Rock Classic draft hard cider, and it's making me think of fall. It's nice and sweet, nice and crisp. It's not yet feeling anything like fall here in Virginia. It doesn't ever until like mid-October.
Yep,
but it's I want it. I'm like, this is me once again willing fall weather to try to come as quickly as possible. So
yeah,
good classic Bold Rock is always. I do prefer Angry Orchard over Bold Rock. I'm sorry. I guess that makes me like less of a Virginian, but
you like what you like.
It's just fine. Yeah, it's good.
They're just people that you buy from. They're companies. You don't have to be allied to them.
Exactly. I will say about Bold Rock over Angry Orchard. Bold Rock isn't as flavorful, but it does taste more genuinely like it's got more natural ingredients. Like, don't get me wrong, I love high fructose corn syrup, and so I'll take it in my beer any day with Angry Orchard's like super, super sugary sweet. I don't know what they actually have in it, and I don't know how they're actually brewed, but I can tell that like between the two, I think Angry Orchard tastes a little bit more synthetic, and I'm okay with that because I like whatever, it doesn't matter. But I will say the Bold Rock does taste more authentically apple-y, so...
I do also appreciate that Bold Rock has a ton of different flavors, including an IPA. So there's a hoppy apple cider that's delicious. But all season, they have so many different types of things out there. It's a pineapple for the summer.
Angry Orchard has all that, too.
Dude,
they have the hoppy one. Yeah, I've had the hoppy one before. Yeah, sweet. All right,
cool. Have you been to Bold Rock out here in, I guess it's like, I don't know what, Nelson County?
No, you see, the funny thing is, like, all these places popped up like when I was on my way out. Like there were some obviously in the area, but like, and Bold Rock, yes, was technically there in the area, but like craft brewery over, like there's the overlap of when like A, craft brewery became popular, B, I was drinking age and actively like had money to go out to drink with my friends, and C was like in the area, and D was also when all these breweries were in the area. Like there was not the overlap is weird. So it didn't.
I mean, Bold Rock opened in 2012, so that's really new. They're only 10 years old. As a company.
2012 is when I got engaged, and then
you were on your way out.
Married 2 years later. Yeah, exactly. And then and that's when I was gone. So I would have had not many opportunities while I lived there. Granted, it's also been 10 years now, so I could have gone there in the intervening 10 years, but just haven't had opportunity or reason to. So, yeah.
Bold Rock has a new Imperial cider. I need to go try that. Sounds yummy. But anyway, we got to come out here and try. You got to go. Their place is gorgeous. It's awesome. It's in the mountains. There's a huge view, and it's great. There's multiple fire pits. It's fantastic.
Stop trying to lure me away from my family.
No, just come visit, and we'll go to Bold Rock. That's
you are active. That is still taking me away from my family. That's luring me.
Bring them. There's a huge field. The kids can go crazy and run around and have fun, and we can drink cider and have a great day.
Oh, that's funny. That is funny. So
when my wife can walk.
Yes, right. There's that intervening thing. So speaking of your wife not being able to walk, how is there anything you want to talk about?
I mean, yeah, I could go on a rant about my personal life. My wife broke her foot, which then puts me in complete control of the children and full responsibility mode. So it has been a little extra trying to juggle full-time job, working from home, and all of the wake ups, drop off, pickups from school. So feeding breakfast, getting them out of the house on time, dressed, clothed, bathed, managing all of the dinner time routine, cooking dinner, cleaning, getting the kitchen ready, baths, bedtime routines are all falling on me every single day. And that 100% on every day is grading and grading and grading. So I'm managing the best I can. Other than that, the only other thing I want to talk about was how amazing, this is not my favorite thing. My favorite thing is a different one. How amazing The Last of Us Part 1, the remake is. And there's a lot of stuff, a lot of noise on the internet that are trying to invalidate it, saying it's not worth 70, it's too soon for a remake, that it was remade on the PS4. It was ported to PlayStation 4 and up-resed and smoothed out. It was not remade on PS4. So this is a video game that came out in 2013, 9 years ago. So I think it totally deserved a remake to bring it up to par with Last of Us Part 2. And it's awesome. And it's hitting different. I'm an adult now. I have children. 2013, I was a newlywed, like you just mentioned. And going through that game then was already an emotional roller coaster. But now it's different. And all of the emotions are conveyed with better animated models, higher resolution textures. Like everything looks and feels so much better, more modern. And it's awesome. So I've had very little time to play because it's very not kid friendly. So I cannot play it at all around children. But yeah, Last of Us Part 1 remake.
It's not a kid friendly. Sweet. I played Rhyme and it made me really sad.
Yeah.
It's good, but like I knew the game. It's one of the things where it's like, you know what the game is about, kind of going in. If you just briefly read the trophy guide, not even like spoilers, but just like the way the game's structured based on what the trophy guide says is like, oh, okay, yeah, this is a game about death and or loss, because it's the 5 stages of each chapter is the 5 stages of grief.
Gotcha.
But what the loss is, and more importantly, like they kind of pull a fast one on you. They make you think it's one thing, and then they Uno card reverse you not halfway through, right at the end. They Uno card reverse you right at the end. And it was pretty devastating. I was like, oh! But it was really funny too, because like that day I had just been talking to Maisie, and talking about the games that I think she might like to play independently, just based on the taste, what she liked about It Takes Two. And I was like, oh, you should, you really like Journey, you'd really like Rhyme. It's very much the same like art style and just like solving puzzles and completely silent, very little exposition, very artistic. And then that happened, and I was like, it will 100% destroy you. Don't play the game. So yeah, it's good though. I mean, it was a good kind of sad, but also a sad kind of sad. And yeah, it was like I used the excuse of having like a handful of D&D games to like not touch it until like for the first time to work on the platinum. Like I have to go back and go through the chapters to get like the platinum, and I'm like resilient now. Like I've like fortified myself. Like I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. But yeah, going back was like, okay, I don't know if I want to platinum. I'm so close. It's like maybe an hour. I could probably like stay up late tonight and get it done. But like it took me forever to just like sit down and get back to it, because I was like, I am big sad now. Big sad am me. Me cry now. Tears to cry time. I am destroyed. But yeah,
you're making me want to play it. I mean, I have a copy from the PlayStation Plus. If y'all audience members claim your monthly PlayStation Plus games over the years, you should have gotten it. So yeah, I have to check that out. I throw it on my list. I am Also playing similarly the Pathless. T-Bone got it for me for my birthday. So you talk about silent art styles, not a lot of exposition. If you like Journey, it's exactly how I would describe the Pathless. It was a launched PlayStation 5 title. They claim it's sort of open world, but it's definitely open zone. You can explore all of the puzzles in any order you would like within a specific zone, and then you collect all the things and you move on. I've only finished the first zone, and you find a bird, and the bird is like the companion, and you can pet this bird, and it's like, he's a good boy, with the bird, like this giant eagle. So I've been enjoying that, but I haven't felt any like other than emotions or anything other than this. I dig the music, I dig the vibe, this is really cool, and like I'm having a good time with it. So
well, that was me too with Rhyme. I was like, wow, this is just like chill, and the music's great. It's very like low stakes, low key, and like I knew, again, I was like, I'm sitting there the whole time, I'm like, I know that kind of the shoe's gonna drop here, but just like when it happened, I just did not see it coming. I was like, but good. It's good stuff still. But yeah, you should play it. It's real. It's cheap. It's free for you. Not really. It's cheap as the cost of the subscription over the last several years, but definitely worth the 8-hour platinum or whatever. Plus, you'll probably follow a trophy guide.
Oh,
which
always.
I was following a guide. I didn't follow the collectibles. There was like a separate collectibles guide, and I was like, so I missed.
I always do that.
Yeah,
give me the screenshots. Give me the text. Tell me where they are. Don't move on until I
should have done it.
I do it all the time.
Coulda, woulda. Well, there is still one you have to go back and do, but it still would have been much shorter if I had just done the thing. But all good, cool. Well, games that are not remasters but actually remakes, and games that make us big sad but big happy and all big meaningful catharsis times are our favorite things. But
80-bit pod smash is our favorite thing.
80-bit pod smash is their favorite thing.
Favorite things segment of our show where we talk about something we're digging, something we love this week, something that you might be inspired to also fall into some happiness. We can inspire you, whatever words we're looking for, encourage you. That's what we're here for. That's what 80-bit pod smash favorite things segment is for. I will go since you just talked a little bit there. Is that fine? Can I go? Yeah, go. This weekend was the release of Splatoon 3, and this game is my favorite thing. It's awesome. And when it was first announced, I rolled, which is how
I do.
That was
my
mental state was like Splatoon 3. It looks nothing different than 2. I'm here to tell you that there's nothing different about it than 2, but it's amazing. It does have a better storyline, but I haven't like actually dove into the story yet. But from what I've heard, the buzz online and friends that I've talked to say that the story is the best one yet. So the single player like campaign that you get is 10 to 15 hours long, apparently is the best one. I've done the first like 3 little sub levels and it's fun, but I'm having a blast doing Turf Wars over and over and over again. Once again, I played Splatoon 1 when it first came out. My son, who is 7 years old, was a brand new baby in a swing in the basement on my Wii U playing Splatoon 1 while I was trying to calm him down so he would sleep. And when he took his nap, I played Splatoon 1. And then Splatoon 2 was a launch title for Switch, 2017. Is that the year? Is that 2017? It sounds weird. Breath of the Wild?
Yeah.
17, right?
It was like,
Yeah, Splatoon 2 came out, and I loved it all over again because it was really, really new.
Ago. Half of a decade ago.
Yeah, right? And now here we are, 5 years later.
Old.
What I really appreciate, and
I don't like getting old,
is the world and the NPCs have grown with you. So the NPC characters are like aged now, like the appropriate amount over the 9 years it's been since we've been introduced to them, which is kind of funny. Nice. I mean, they're kind of inconsequential. They're just like storefront folks, but yeah, upgrading your gear, playing Turf Wars over and over. I mean, this is the straight up. Everyone criticizes Call of Duty Battlefield for being a mindless grind. You just play match after match after match after match, and you get tchotchkes and you level up and stuff. That's totally what this is. But this is way more fun. Like, I'm having a blast, and I haven't had fun with this, like a game like this, in a while. So I probably played too much Splatoon 3 over the weekend. But I was kids were around, kids were outside, whatever. Like, I was playing Splatoon 3. It was great. I was even playing with neighborhood kids because other kids in our neighborhood got the game, and I was like jumping into their games and splatting them. It was hilarious.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So anyway, that's my favorite.
I've heard the matchmatching is better, which is almost reason enough to get it, but not quite for me.
It's still $60 for like a
exactly
glorified DLC to Splatoon 2.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Cool. My favorite thing is
House of the Dragon.
no.
Lord of the Rings, the Men of Power
Oh,
Ring
I
man.
liked
thing.
I liked Thor: Love and Thunder more than I thought I was gonna like.
Yeah, I'm so excited
I
you liked it.
I I had seen the like I had read like the spoilers, like what it was, and I guess maybe the way it was worded was just poor, which is understandable considering that a lot of people did receive it poorly. But like I knew I wasn't going to see it anyways. But I was like, you know what? Instead of just trying to like torture myself and trying to avoid spoilers, I just won't. But this was one of those circumstances where those spoilers did set my expectations nice and low, but then actually seeing them like make it happen was like, oh, okay. And like I had said, I think I had posted this on Facebook or something, but I was like, yeah, Ragnarok was great, but it was a sci-fi movie. Thor had always been like Marvel's dip into fantasy, and Love and Thunder brought that back. It felt like a fantasy movie. It felt like a heroic group of warriors, magical warriors, had to get their magical weapons and save the day from a evil monster who wanted to gain unlimited power from a wish granting, sorcerer, so to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it was basically a fantasy story arc. And yes, it had space travel, it had the Bifrost, it had all the stuff that is identifiably Thor, and had all the stuff that was identifiably their whole like magic is just science we don't understand yet thing, which is great and fine and wonderful. I'm here for it. But it felt like a fantasy, and that was what Thor was missing for at least the last, like at least Ragnarok was kind of missing that for me.
Now that I'm educated on what jossification is, do you feel like that was that too much in Love and Thunder? Because it was in there. I mean,
no, it's totally in there. Taika Waititi. Well, so
yeah.
like for as much as people like crap on Joss Whedon for it, like James Gunn and Taika Waititi are no better, right? Like are no better at the whole like minimizing or subverting what should be dramatic character moments with quippy, like devil may care humor, right? Like they do that both of those directors do that all the time.
Yeah.
And so yeah, of course it was there. Again, I've been a sucker for I was a Joss Whedon fan back in the like mid.
Well, yeah, he was unique and he stood out, so it made sense that we would love that. Yeah. Now it's exactly. Like you said, the mainstream. Everyone is trying to do that, including video games. And
but I like expect it from Marvel, right?
Okay,
it's one thing when like Square Enix does it on like what could have been otherwise very unique experience.
Forspoken, but yeah.
No, I'm talking about Forspoken. Yeah,
Forspoken.
It's a whole nother thing when no, and that's what made the Chaos thing so great is he was so self-serious, and yet it was just so absurd. It was a whole different thing. It was almost like postmodern in the way it like dissected how video game dialogue. You're right. Yeah, exactly. And how it like it was like the lines he's saying are in this case it's like the lines he's saying are so like stupid and dumb and idiotic, and yet he 100% commits to them. Yep. But yeah, no, but again, for what it's worth, like, and as much as like I can see why people would be tired of jossification, I don't mind it so much in places I expect it to be, like Joss Whedon shows or Marvel movies, or you know what I mean. But like I can agree where it's like if it's leaking into some video games, it's fine, and others it's a bit of an eye roll. I can see it, right? Like it's like, and it's a process, right? Everybody's gonna be like in a different spot in where they are tolerating of it and stuff. But yeah, no, I did like I liked it. I liked Thor: Love and Thunder. Thought it was fun. It was not the worst Marvel movie since Thor 2, but
all right,
cool. All right.
It was pretty bad. You reminded me of movies. So before we go on to DLC, we have to rewind the clock and go back to banter just for a second in between the two segments.
Okay.
Did you know that MoviePass is coming back?
I did. And they're actually moving to what seems like an intelligent and sustainable model that they should have had the first time around.
Do you know Homeboy Termite over here is on the wait list?
Our friend Matt.
I will receive 10 invites. I will receive 10 invites,
I don't want
and
it.
you will get
one.
want
it. No, I don't want it because I don't want it because I can't go to movies anymore. Are you freaking kidding me? When am I going to go to a movie? When am I going to use MoviePass?
11 a.m. every day.
So I'm going to drive 20 minutes.
Go see a movie.
Go watch a movie for 2 hours and then drive back. That is a 4-hour time commitment for me. That is not a lunch. that is. I come home and my wife's like, "I hope you had fun at your movie. Here's the kids." And I say, "Well, I haven't gotten any work done yet." And she says, "Then here's a bullet. And please let me sink it 5 inches into your brain so that I can find a husband who's worth it."
Wow.
So thank you, but no thank you. I don't want your movie pass. I am not in a stage of life where a movie pass fits. That's fun.
Yeah, it's true. We do have children. But yeah, I don't have to drive 20 minutes to a theater, I don't think. It might be close. But yeah, I'm excited because, I kept my movie pass all the way.
Actually,
the analogy of Jack Sparrow, his ship is sinking into the harbor at the entrance of Pirates of the Caribbean, standing on the mast, and then he walked onto the dock. That was me with movie pass. So I am in for whatever new iteration they are. I'm just waiting for them to go live in our region.
You are so easy to sell to. Like,
oh yeah, I'm totally it. I'm just trash. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're just now coming to know this? How long have we done this show?
No. I've realized it. It baffles me every time. You just sucker yourself into something.
Yeah. And when my lifestyle doesn't sustain it at all, and it's a complete waste of money and time. Yeah, I do that a lot.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, our next segment is DLC. It stands for downloadable content. It's a gimmick, a fun little game that we play. That's a different kind of prompt. It gets the brain juices flowing. It's a conversation that you may or may not normally have about video games. So we're talking about terminology tonight. So I wanted to kind of prime the pump. And since we don't have I didn't have time to fit this in our main questions. I wanted to throw in DLC here, which is, I'll probably throw out the term zeitgeist at some point tonight. It just means the overall cultural attitude towards things. And so what are some terms that are no longer used that fell out of the zeitgeist that you were fond of and you wish we still did them? We still said them.
Ooh, can I give you one that I was fond of and I'm glad that we don't use anymore?
Well, sure.
Because I mean, it was cool at the time, but it really is bad. And it's kind of not tasteful. But I really, really, really loved when I was playing Counter-Strike. For some reason, this was high school Termite, right? Just think of late high school Termite. Right. I don't understand the world. I don't understand the weight of American history.
Are you going to say something very...
No, it's not going to be a slur. No. But I remember we were at a LAN cafe for the first time I heard this word, but it took over. It was a zeitgeist thing. This was around Halo 2 time. But someone would get murked. Murked is actually one of the newer. I love murked. That's great. That's modern. That's good. Someone would get murked, which means wrecked, killed, slain, fragged, whatever. And the person would stand up and go, "I own you." And I love owned. And of course, that turned into pwned. With the
pwned was going to be mine. Yeah, pwned. Yeah,
yeah. And so
I like all the typo ones.
The typo ones are great, but owning someone is definitely not. I'm glad it's not used anymore, at least not in the mainstream. Because owning someone is very problematic. We're not going to talk that's not. We need to get away from that as a culture, and I'm glad we have. So I don't want it back. I just do have a good fondness of it. It was funny.
That was never my understanding of the origin of it, right? The origin of the word. It never was meant to. It never implied or was meant to imply a racial slavery ownership kind of thing. Mine was pwned, but I like all the ones that were basically just misspelled, mistyped things, frist. Where frist comes from.
I don't know what that is.
It's more of an internet thing, but I saw it a lot in gaming cultures too. It was basically there used to be a whole thing on the internet where if you were the first person to respond to something, that's what you responded with was first.
Oh, first, right?
But then it became, because people would type it so fast, it became fist. And then there would instead of second, it would be scond.
Yep. Yeah. That's funny.
That's good stuff. Yeah, that was fun. I'm trying to think what other things. I had thought for a long time that aggro had fallen off.
Oh no,
the usage, but now it's still there, and I thought it was pretty much exclusive to MMOs, but now people apparently still say it, and it's super popular. It's on this list, the very first one on the list. That's why I was like, oh, okay, all right. Yeah. I'm blanking on. I had some when I thought of this, and now they're all gone, of course. But There we go. Well, we want to hear what yours are. Apparently, both Termite and I, we both want to just own people. That's all. I just want to own you. I just want to own you in a game. I want you to get owned, right? Like
Get pwned.
that, or pwned. Pwned. I preferred pwned anyways.
Yeah.
Like My Little Ponies, like was a guild at one point. Yeah. I saw in WoW. Good stuff. All right. Well, we want to hear, listeners, what your terms that you miss. What are things that once were said and are no longer said about games? I have one. I have another one.
Oh, okay.
I kind of miss when we used to call things clones as opposed to likes. So instead of Souls likes, back in the day, we would have called it a Souls clone, right? Doom clone. I know we still Diablo kind clone. Of. Yeah, but it's not as. I feel like more journalists are pushing like Diablo like as opposed to Diablo clone.
Huh.
And Diablo has its own genre now, like ARPG, right? Like ARPGs are what they use ARPG, right? But like it used to be
Halo
if it was, but like think of like if we used like 20, 30 years ago, it would have been Doom likes or Halo likes, StarCraft likes, right? Like I don't know, like but then we call them clones. That's one. So
interesting.
I feel like just clone was just more honest than like
it was. Yeah.
That's what it is, right? Yeah. Like oh yeah, no, it's just kind of like Souls games. Like no, it's a Souls clone.
Yeah.
If we're gonna call it something stupid, we might as well like go full in and call it clones.
I like it.
So yeah, word. All right, now for real, listeners, we want to hear what your terms you missed are. So Termite, where can they share their DLC thoughts if they have them?
Yeah, share us what you yelled at your friends when you were playing GoldenEye and they were screen cheating. Tell us that, whatever it was, as long as it's not a racial slur, because we don't have any space for that here. But outside of that, let us know what you said to your friends over at 80bitpodsmash.com. That's our landing website, 80bitpodsmash.com, where you can let us know via our social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter. We also have a Discord. You can jump in, hang out with us, chat with us. We discuss all kind of fun things about like the news, what games we're playing, and who we see in real life or on the internet playing certain games. I call you out on Discord. It's fun. Gamertime was playing Splatoon 3 tonight. I didn't get a chance to play with him, but I hit him up on Discord. You can be a part of that. Just go to 80bitpodsmash.com. If you're finding us by way of like YouTube or Twitch and you want to know more about our show, every Monday at midnight, a new episode of 80bit Podsmash drops, and you can get access to that right away by subscribing over at Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. We have an RSS feed you can throw into any app you would like, even if you don't want to use any of those big platforms, right? We're everywhere. 80bitpodsmash.com has everything you need to get more of Penguin and Termite in your ears, in your eyes, and in your brain as much as you want. Or not. It's up to you.
Nice. All right, now on to our main topic. We are talking about the use and effectiveness of gaming terminology, or the relative importance of a gaming glossary. So let's start with kind of like laying the ground rules. What is terminology in general, but also in gaming, and why is it important? But also, so we're kind of like, usually we throw why like into the third or fourth question, but we're going to start just right off the top of the bat. Why is it relatively important, and why is it relatively unimportant when it comes to gaming?
It's the same as if it comes to anything else. You want to define the terminology so you can accurately describe and communicate with other people and everyone's kind of on the same page, create standards where everyone knows what everyone's talking about. So if you come in with a word like, oh, I drew a bunch of aggro, someone who doesn't know what aggro means would be like, what is that? What? But that affects like the flow of a video game if you're working together as a team, for example. Like that's so defining terms allow everyone to be on the same page, to be able to have discussions around video games and the things about them and in them, so that everyone knows what everyone's talking about with standardized terminology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's not much more to add to that. You got it. It's just kind of the, like a glossary is just basically another, when we use the term glossary, it's just like a dictionary, right? Like it's the same idea is just sort of like agreeing, what can we agree upon this word means. And it's one of those things where it's like, to pivot into the next question, like, why is it important? Well, it's all important that we all understand what each other's saying. So on some level, terminology is a natural occurring process, right? It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a PlayStation published official guide. Terminology is going to happen because it's people say the thing and then they agree upon it, right? They agree upon what it means because it's of its usage. And that's important, right? That's a naturally occurring process in a culture, but it's also something that can be helped along, right? By so quote unquote like manufactured processes, right?
Mhm.
And that's okay when it is, right? That's not like it's no better or worse, right? There are some people who will be like, oh man, they ruined the term. Well, they ruined the term aggro because they like included it in this game. It's like no. They were participating in the cultural significance of the term.
Yep.
So
It's like if a
why
bunch
is
of
it?
people got together and started discussing something on the street, and then some other folks heard these folks talking about something, and they're like, "What is that?" You can go to UrbanDictionary.com. Kids do
Mhm.
not do this without guidance of
No,
parents
no,
ever,
no.
because Urban Dictionary has a lot of bad language. But you can get definitions of cultural slang. This is kind of the same thing, but in the gaming space and much more family friendly than Urban Dictionary is. But it's like you said, we're getting together and just make up a term, and then in that moment that term can become something, and then we start spreading it to our friends, and then it becomes a thing, and then like in our culture, in our spaces, now new terms come out and it means something, and then like an official video game developer could go grab that term and throw it in a video game, and people will complain that like, oh, it's gone mainstream or whatever. But that's how terms get made. That's kind of where they come from.
Yeah, it's a really interesting fact. I had just kind of Googled aggro on the side, and it actually did not originate in video games. It was British slang. And so we
Ah,
have English gamers probably to thank for the term aggro, because they probably got on and started throwing the term aggro around,
yeah,
and then it just caught on like wildfire. Fascinating. So you can tell I'm a big nerd about words and their origins.
yeah.
So why is it relatively unimportant? Well, it's because like we like to frame these topics as if we just had a whole series in June where we talked about like gaming being something that should be approachable for non-gamers, right? And this is one of those things where it's like we need to make sure this is approachable, because as far as a topic goes, because like it is important if you are interested in communicating and like relating to gamers and gamer spaces. It is an important thing. Why is it unimportant? Because ultimately at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, right? You can use the actual terms the games themselves provide. You can use your own terms. You can describe it your own way, or you just don't have to understand it to still like you don't ultimately have to understand it. It's not like you're going to lose friends or lose relationships if you don't understand these things. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's still all just about games. So it's not really important in the grand scheme of things. But, it's one of those, like when you acknowledge that aspect of it first, then yeah, it can be an important thing as far as like it's sort of one of those micro cultural like components, pieces of any
And
given
it's applicable at like every level of understanding. So like a parent
mhm.
who is researching a title sees couch co-op or split screen, which is actually a real example. This past week, a parent came to me and was like, I just now learned what the difference between couch co-op and split screen is. I'm like, yeah, those are two gaming terms that are not super obvious. When you put the two
Right.
next to each other, you're like, what's the difference? And parents can make decisions about purchasing games for their children or for the family based on knowing these terms that may or
Yeah.
may not be like mainstream. But then you also have like the technical discussions, which we'll get into, like all the different types of terms of like between two nerds who want to talk about like the differences between PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. And you start talking about frame rate and vertical synchronization and variable refresh rates and all those things. Like you get into super
And even
terms.
some of
Like,
those, like and some of us, it's like, blah. Some of us are like not even so into it that we understand all those things. Like I still, we've been doing this podcast for how many years, and I still couldn't tell you the exact difference between like anti-aliasing and right, like like
ambient occlusion?
it reduces screen tears, I think, but like
Nope, that's not
screen,
it.
nope, that's not
Entirely
it.
different.
Okay,
That's
cool. See,
wrong.
there you go,
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. That's why we were
Uh,
doing this episode.
Exactly. Well, we're not doing it for that. We're not
Right.
going to go through
Yeah,
and be
yeah,
like,
that's
you
true.
will now
Right.
know every single term.
We could, but we'd
But
be here for 4 hours.
well, we couldn't, because this it never would be done, because it always changes. It's
That's
always
true.
changing. So
Yeah.
cool. Well, then, what kinds? I think here's a spot where we can say we can take a really high look at it, and we can say what kinds of things, what kinds of aspects of gaming end up getting terms usually, right? Like what are the things that we end up making terms for? I would say one of the biggest ones is genres or styles. You put game modes here too. Like anything that could be used to describe a game will ultimately, for better or for worse, end up with some kind of term. for better or for worse, right? So, because some are more elegantly named than others, some need to be renamed over time with lots of concentrated effort. But yeah, like one way or another, a genre or a style, like a genre is going to get, you know, and we talk about this all the time on this show, right? So sandbox versus open world, like those implied different game, like slightly different, very similar game genres, but they're different. And you know, you horde versus boss rush, those are so like the nuance between it, like the moment to moment gameplay is both simultaneously entirely different and then not at all, right? Like, it's like, yep, they're essentially a similar game mode, but not quite, right? A boss rush is you're fighting all of the bosses in the game in order. And sometimes, you know, if you die, you have to go back to the beginning, like a soul, like a roguelike, right? Like more terms, right? And that's what the thing that's tough about gaming spaces is we so often use terms to describe other terms, which is for an outsider mind-boggling. It is. And this whole topic, it's like one of the reasons why it's both important and unimportant is it is a language. It's almost entirely its own language, and you either understand it or you don't, or you understand parts of it but not all of it. And it's and it takes time.
I love like
it,
trying to describe Returnal, which is like a third-person shooter, action adventure platformer, roguelike. Like there's so many terms just to try and describe. If you don't know those terms and you look at Returnal and you ask someone behind the counter, what is this game? And they just tell you what I just said. Like you look at them like you have three heads. You have no idea what any of that means. You got to break it down.
And that's what's so important, because we do so instinctively, like, I know the meaning of this in my head. I don't know how to divorce. I know the meaning so much in my head that I don't know how to divorce that from, like, it takes practice to actually say, oh, you don't actually know what any of that means. Let me speak it to you in English. It's a game where you go shoot aliens. You're stuck in a time loop. Like Groundhog's Day, you make a different cultural reference.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
you're stuck in a loop over and over again. So that when you die, you start back at the very beginning, and that's it. And then you shoot more aliens until you die again, and have to go back to the beginning and try to get farther and farther each time. Like boom, like that's a very simple. And usually they are so simple to basically boil down to.
Explain it like I'm five, right?
And almost easier the ELI 5 way. There's another internet term, so online, which is another term. So much of our language is rooted in these cultural terms. Anyways, the bottom line is, sometimes the simple explanation actually is better and easier than the very heavy term based roguelike, souls like third person in action RPG, right? Yeah. So genres are a big one where we see terms. You want to do the next one?
Yeah, mechanics is the next term. When someone's talking about dialogue trees or stat trees, fast travel, like different things that kind of define what your moment-to-moment gameplay will look like as you're experiencing the game. Those are all things like, what kind of mechanics does it have? Does it have hack and slash mechanics? Is it shooter mechanics? Like, sometimes just because you have shooter mechanics doesn't necessarily mean it's Halo. It's like going back to my Returnal example with being a third person over the shoulder game, a cover shooter like Gears of War, where you're always taking cover and peeking out and like taking pop shots. Like the mechanics of the game, describing what is a platformer, what does that look like? Collectathon is another term where like you're just collecting a bunch of stuff. And there's so many different things that like define.
Right, or even down to like the individual components, like reticles, or you know, you had stat trees or skill trees, or like we have all these terms
turn-based or real-time action. You know, like real-time versus turn-based. Of course, you're talking about RPGs, that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. No, a lot of mechanics get termified.
And we probably just, if you don't know any of those terms, those are things to describe. What is it? If you play a Final Fantasy game from like the old days, you're going to have a turn-based menu. You're going to have like attack, item, and everything stops. You get to choose from a menu what you want your characters to do.
It's like chess. It's like you take your turn doing chess. But that's slightly different from a tactics turn-based, right? Because then it's based on that actually is more like chess, where you actually have a positionality component too. You're not just like, pause, it's my turn, I'm going to just figure out what to do. I do my attack, and then the character does the attack. That's more like D&D. But like tactics is like, no, but you have the spatial component and different, like, oh, you can't put this color thing on this color thing because that color thing is a whole different thing, right? So there's a whole and it has turn-based elements, of course, or includes turn-based rather, combat, but it's also a whole different level of it. And we find that all the time. The next one is sort of strategies that these kind of pop up around, like, okay, now you have humans playing the game and they're doing specific things, and they might be doing specific things based on the intended way the game was designed. But what the game might call like guarding, or you're the guard, you're the guardian, whatever, and this person is the healer, the cleanser, the refresher, or whatever. We're gonna call them tanking, healing. I'm gonna draw the tank. I'm gonna draw the aggro, right? Like what about, other than having like heavy armor and being super slow, what about an actual tank implies to you that they're going to draw any kind of fire? In fact, quite the opposite. The whole point is like, look, we're so thick that you should not even bother shooting us, and also we have a giant cannon that's going to blow things up. We're going to do the most damage.
Yeah.
Like an actual tank. So how other than heavy armored and slow did tank become like synonymous with the one who does little damage but like taunts and draws aggro? Yeah, that's the thing. But yeah, no, we've hit it a lot because it's like, again, one of the first ones on this list. So it just like pops into my aggro. But yeah, like drawing aggro, or you put camping is great, like when you're camping. Oh, and that's another genre / style thing that we should talk about. PvE versus PvP, player versus player versus player versus environment. Like those are huge. Those are very commonly used, and actually some of the most, we'll talk about the important ones, but those are going to be on the list of like most important, right? So camping is a particular PvP strategy where you player versus player, strategy where you
that's it.
You wait for them to come back at their spawn point. Another term there, that's a mechanic, right? But like camping a spawn point, then you're talking about a strategy term to describe, like a strategy term describing a mechanical term. It's nuts.
Yeah, and if it was capture the flag, that's like you can camp the flag, not just their spawn. You can camp different spots. You can camp choke points where enemies just run through and like are constrained by the environment, so you camp that spot. Yeah. So yeah, camping is just sitting there, like exploiting some sort of tactical advantage and using it to just sit there and not actually move around. It's kind of derogatory. People don't like that a lot.
Sure,
but
yeah,
some games build that in.
Yep. We find I think that events, and I didn't you've been good at listing examples. I hadn't listed any examples, but the ones that come to mind, there are the like manufactured events, of course, like E3, BlizzCon. Like these are buzzwords that, of course, like on the one hand, an outsider may not understand off the top of their head. On the other hand, like these are also like highly marketed things, right? Decided on and marketed things. But I also think of things like unexpected events in games, such as like the Blood Plague in World of Warcraft, right? Like we call it the Blood Plague, and because that's what it was in a way, but also like I don't think that the spell or whatever that like caused it was called Blood Plague. I feel like it had a whole different name.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
You don't know what I'm talking about? I'm certain we've talked about it on the podcast before. The Blood Plague happened in vanilla World of Warcraft, where there was a new boss that had just come out. His name was Hakar. It was Zul'Gurub. It was like a 20-person. It was like the game's first 20-person raid, so it was like a smaller raid. And Hakar had an ability where he basically infected your blood. And the whole point of the mechanic was you would be infected for 5 minutes, and anybody who was close to you, like proximity-wise, allies who were close to you, the infection would literally jump to them. And it wasn't like locked to your party. It was literally any ally. But of course, you're in an instanced dungeon. How on earth could the Blood Plague possibly spread? We don't need to program this to like not spread to the average Joe, because it doesn't matter. It's gonna they're never gonna be out of the instance. Well, there is a spell where warlocks could do a summoning ritual to pull someone out of the instance, so people would go aggro a car, get the Blood Plague, and then have their friends summon them out into the cities. Like they would do it on the auction house in Ironforge, and then perfect. It spread. I'll just say this: the CDC used it as a model to study pandemics and how they spread amongst populations. Is because so the Blood Plague, the Blood Plague, and it was like an event, a thing that just naturally happened. That was exploiting game mechanics,
an in-game event.
An in-game event, exactly. Yeah. Just that one time that one thing happened. Yeah, do you remember that? Like that we use terms for that all the time, obviously, and they can only get their own names, right? So
it's both stuff that you've highlighted. I like. We have the Game Awards, we have the E3, we have the stuff in real life that's happening at events around
Summer Games Fest,
Summer Games Fest, Nintendo Directs, PlayStation State of Plays, like all this stuff's happening. But in games, we have events as well. Destiny 2 has stuff going on. Borderlands has stuff going on. The like Division and Rainbow Six, all of the Apex Legends, and Fortnite has events for days going on inside. Sometimes there's movie trailers released inside of Fortnite as an in-game event.
Right.
Like, and so being able to navigate what the heck people are talking about when they mention these games and their events, like that's what's going on.
Right. But yeah,
People
and then
are
there's the homegrown ones, right? Like Return to Yharnam, you know, it happens in May or whatever, because that's when the game came out for Bloodborne.
Yeah.
And I have my own little Return to Yharnam that happens every October, which will be happening this October too. So anybody who wants to play Bloodborne with me on PlayStation, you can do it. Blah, blah, blah. Return to Yharnam. Yeah, so cool. We can move on. The next thing that often gets termified, I think, is this is a good one for you to talk about because you had mentioned it previously. But the technical terminology around gaming that often has to do with how well a game performs or how a game runs on hardware. But yeah, what's
if you ever decide you want to know the frame rate, the frames per second of animation that the PlayStation can do versus the Xbox on a given game, or like how an engine is optimized to do that, go to Digital Foundry. They're a YouTube arm of Eurogamer. They're officially like a legit journalism arm that does performance analysis on video games, and they break everything down, and they will describe all of the terms: anti-aliasing, anisotropic filtering, all of the details of animation, pixel counting, resolution scaling, variable refresh rates, and the technology of like what you're running with your monitor, your TV, and the consoles, how they handle that, gaming PCs. There's like all this stuff, and it just gets crazy. But it's like, it does matter in the sense super users really care about it because it makes purchasing decisions for them. So it's like you want to make sure a TV has the 120 hertz refresh rate to handle the 120 hertz modes of the gaming consoles, and like handles low latency game modes for input lag and like all this stuff. And so to be like an educated consumer, you kind of need to know those things. So that's what technical discussions are there. Comparing the consoles and how the graphics look is always important to be able to like have discussions with friends and whoever else on the internet that's talking about like why PlayStation might be my preferred platform over Xbox, but yet knowing the Xbox Series X has more teraflops of capability than the PlayStation. So like knowing what that means and the nuance of all of that is the technical stuff. That's like the low level. Not everyone needs to know those things, but if you're into it at all, there's a little primer on that.
Yep. Nice.
Oh, and then the last thing about patch notes. Sorry, it was knowing the technical terms helps you understand what when you read patch notes, when your favorite game gets a new update, you're like, oh, sweet, Cyberpunk has this new update. And they just go on and on about like UI changes and frame rate stuff and like all of the stuff I just mentioned. When you know what that means, you can process a patch notes list and either get excited or not. When you understand balancing, stuff like nerfing, and I was lumping that at like when you nerf an ability, you kind of make it weaker. You can give a buff to abilities and changing the gameplay balance between like character classes and such. All of that is the low level technical discussions that are fitting in this category of terms. There's so many terms. Go check out some patch notes and get confused because there's so many terms.
Yep. All right. Well, so we got 3 questions left. Someone's gonna have to give, but so you also had social slang, so things like behaviors and in culture jokes and stuff like that. So those we've already talked a fair amount about. I want to move on to the next question, and that is, how does a gaming term get defined in the first place? So how does something about gaming, how does that happen in the first place? Typically, there are 2 ways, right? There's the fact that sometimes it's just like it is what it's called, right? Like, or it was what it was first called, right? In the game or whatever that popularized it, and they called it that in that. So like I think of like how loot typically falls into the sort of like the rare, uncommon, rare, legendary, right? Like that comes
Epic.
from WoW, right? Epic and legendary, right? Like those were literally just what the game, like how the designers decided to like describe rarity, and then like it caught on, right? Like it became like just a design, like that is what it is, right? Legendary gear, in no matter what game you're playing, like legendary gear is supposed to be the highest quality, and thanks to WoW, right? And if it's not, like, right, like Destiny had exotics, like people still refer to them as legendaries, I think, because it was just so much more popular. So like that is one way, of course, but the most common way is it is just something that pops up naturally in the culture, right? Like the people start using it that way, and then it catches on, and eventually journalists who are also contributors people of the culture, like they catch on and start using it. And then eventually designers and developers use it. And sometimes they use it cheekily, like to make fun of it, right? But sometimes they use it seriously to like just be like, yeah, this is what it is, right? Like, especially when they're talking about the game, because they are also gamers as well, right? If they're making games. But yeah.
Yeah, there was 100 million subscribers to World of Warcraft in November of 2020. So it was always as like World of Warcraft was so popular. South Park had an entire episode devoted to it. It was a big deal, and so something like a system of common, uncommon, rare, epic, and legendary was so ubiquitous across gaming that everyone just started copying it because everyone made it just made sense. So anyone who had played WoW could jump off and play a different game, and it made sense to like the rarity of gear or cards or loot or whatever you're having. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So terms also get defined in how people describe stuff. You know, all those like low level technical terms all have their slang that goes with it. And so you talk about like anti-aliasing. It's just like, I don't know how to describe that other than like smoothing edges would be the slang for that. But it'd be like, how well does your computer, process lighting or like render shaders, and like that's just slang for all the different type of low level technical terms. So like when people are trying to short circuit, name drop, and get an idea out quickly, that's how terms get defined. That's how new terms get defined. You talk about genres and how like we describe, well, instead of saying a third person action adventure platformer where you start over when you die, you just say, oh, it's a third person roguelite. Like, oh, okay, got it. And so like those types of things get reinforced as they catch on, and then we get new terms. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. I do know. All right. Well, the next question I have, what do you think are the sort of the most important terms then? Like, what are the ones that you think are like, okay, say that you do want to understand or you do want to connect more with your gaming relative, or you're trying to kind of like get into it, or you're you're just a wee lad or lass just kind of taking your first steps into the gaming world. What are the term? What are like if you had to pick like 5 terms that were the most important? What terms would you pick?
It's impossible. It
Yeah,
depends on
not 5.
who you are, and
you don't have to stick. You don't have to stick to 5. But I feel like there are a few that are like generally you need to understand what this means, like to kind of carry on a conversation. I think the PVs are one, right? Like PVE and PvP, those kind of count as one because they're literally meant to describe the opposite of each other. Like I think that like that's sort of a very basic kind of like what kinds of games are you into? If you could boil all games into like 2 categories, it would be,
yeah, I guess it'd be that
we call them competitive or we call them solo too, right? Like those are also other terms for the same kind of thing. But like, yeah, I mean, but like competitive and co-op are used to describe different kinds of multiplayer, but then there's solo, right? Like, so PvE is that nice encapsulating term that counts for both solo games and co-op games, which is, do you want to play against other people or do you not? And so I think those the PVs are great for that, and great for just sort of all around like boiling all games down into 2 categories, right? Those are good ones. I think that
alludes to single player, multiplayer. Like you should know what that means, and it's kind of self-explanatory.
Right.
But
mm-hmm.
What kind of multiplayer? Live service or couch co-op, split screen? Like those are extremely important for everyone to understand. But making a purchasing decision about a game, to even assess what a game is important. So that's mine. I'll throw that down there.
Sure. I think that also, obviously, you don't have to have like a thorough understanding of all consoles, but like you should probably know the major, like the names and like at least a best guess at what the like acronyms would be for, because you and I will be like Series X, SX, right? Xbox Series X or Xbox SX or just Series X, right?
Yeah.
Or PS5, right? Like, it's good to know what we're referring to when we're talking about that, right? If I say PS5 and you're like, sorry, what? It'd be hard to have a conversation, right? So it's sort of like it's again, it's not like required. Obviously, it's not required. And I'm the kind of person that would just be like, I'm sorry, PlayStation 5. It's Sony's console, right? The person that made your speakers, your headset, they also make pretty cool game console. But like, so it's not required, and I would absolutely be the kind of person to explain it. But like, it's still one of those things where it's like it's sort of it's one of the things that you will approach when you approach gaming. Again, this is sort of my picks are always things I think that are going to be like, when you're approaching this culture, these are the things you're going to be confronted with first. And like, what do you play? What do you want to play, and what do you play on? I feel like are like number one, like, do you want to play against someone, or do you want to not play against someone? And what are you going to play on? Right? Like, they are the what's your name and where are you from of gaming. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and I'll throw out another important term. Is just like a subset of the genres. Like knowing what a shooter is. You don't need to know first person or third person, but knowing what a shooter is, knowing what action adventure means, knowing what an RPG is. So like just knowing like that family of genres that are the highest level ones will greatly help you find friends to play with or ask questions at stores. Like, again, figuring out your purchasing decisions. What are you getting into?
If you ever feel like you're embarrassed by like using a game to describe another game, don't, because all of us do it, right?
That's all we do.
Right. So it's perfectly acceptable if you don't know a term for something. It is also 100% acceptable to be like, it's kind of like this game. Yeah, that's fine. We all do
Borderlands,
that.
looter shooter. Like,
I know all the terms, not all the terms, but I know many of the terms, and I'll still just be like, it's like that one game. I want it to be like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yep. Cool. Awesome. Well, we can end on this last question, which is, terminology can be either rigid or fixed, or it can be flexible and dynamic, right? Do you think it's better for terminology to be rigid, or is it better to be dynamic? And then when and how should terms be allowed to change, and when should terms set in stone?
You are talking to Termite. What do you think I'm going to say?
Rigid, always rigid.
Always rigid. They should have one single definition. They should never be redefined, and they should never be altered by context. They should be as plain and as clear as possible at all times.
Great. So you're no longer allowed to use the term first-person shooter. You should say Doom clone, because it was always originally a Doom clone, right? If the name is stupid, it should change, right? Like, Doom clone served at the time because there was nothing
you're
else
thinking
like
of it opposite. So I would say like first-person shooter should never be used to describe anything else but a first-person shooter.
No, I'm talking about the term
name,
itself.
Like,
when a thing is named, should that name ever change?
But a Doom clone is always a Doom. Like, I'm not going to use the word Doom clone to describe Elden Ring. That's what I'm saying against. I'm against that. Doom clone is a solid term.
Of course.
And so it should be rigid and change forever.
Which is when
they can have the same definition. No. I'm okay with that. A Doom clone in FPS.
We're both describing the same thing. It's just like, yes, you are right. The term should never be used to describe something that doesn't fit its definition. But the term itself, as long as the definition is the same, the term itself should sometimes change depending on the context, right? That said, first-person shooter is about as good as it's going to get. It's clear, it's crisp, it's got a nice acronym.
There's
FPS.
no reason to change it.
There's no reason to change FPS, but there was absolutely a reason to change Doom clone, because Doom clone no longer was accurate either, because there's so many first-person shooters that are nothing like Doom. And so we're getting that. I think we're getting to that point with. I've said this before. Like, we're getting to that point with Souls-likes, right? We're getting to that point with that genre where it's like, yeah, they can share the same elements but be very different types of games, and it's time that we should begin to look for a better term for that definition.
Absolutely. So we're on the same page. We kind of agree. A rigid term to describe the nuances of Souls.
It's funny, but what you said is like, because you said it from my point of view. Like, from my point of view, interpreting what you said was like it should never change. It should always be the same. We should always call it what was always been called. And I'm like,
right, yeah. You latched onto that one point. So to articulate that point is to say FPS should never change. Like, it's exactly what it is. But when you use the word like Souls-like to describe Kena, Bridge of Spirits versus Elden Ring, two very different games, you can't use the ambiguous term.
Elements, but
but like, that's what I'm saying. So Souls-like is too ambiguous. I want the terms that are the clearest, most well-defined definitions that have no ambiguity. The opposite, which is like first-person shooter.
We've got Souls-light, which is not confusing at all for anybody.
Right? Yeah,
it's so clear. It couldn't be any clearer how Souls-like and Souls-lights are both different and also not hard to say.
Yeah. Like, what? Yeah. And thinking of like Enter the Gungeon versus Returnal, both are rogue lights versus roguelike, whatever. Very different games. Like, You can't use that you have to use more terms like to get the
recursive.
ambiguity
I like
out.
recursive. Why can't we do recursive? Recursive sounds so good. I love that. Thank you, Yahtzee, for that one.
Yeah.
And that should only ever be used to describe the element of having to redo it, right? Like, or do it like rubber band, right? If the game has any kind of rubber banding, looping, or resetting elements, recursive. So therefore, recursive action RPG would be used to describe Dark Souls. Recursive, like recursive open world action RPG. Boom. Elden Ring, right? Like, whatever gaming culture community, here's the chance for you to rage back at us as we rage at you for your silly terms on things. And also we love you guys and don't ever change, but please change your terms, and please tell us what terms need to be changed, what terms have been used to describe things outside of their definitions, right? As you were putting it, what do you think about gaming terminology, and ultimately, are we just wasting our time talking about it? We want to hear all those thoughts and more, and Termite will share with us where you can share with you that the words stop at 10:19 p.m. Go.
You can talk all about the differences between World of Warcraft and Destiny and what's an MMO or not over at 80bitpodsmash.com. It's our landing website with links to all of our social media outlets. As I said earlier in the show, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Twitter, and Discord, as well as our audio feeds are available for Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, etc. Throw our RSS feed in wherever you want us. You can find us every Monday at midnight. We drop a new episode. What's that?
Wherever you want us, we'll be there. Nothing.
Yeah, that's it. In your brain.
I was surprised as to how passionate I was about this topic. Like I kind of saw this topic and I was like, okay, this is a throwaway topic. It's not. None of our topics are throwaway topics, but like in my mind, I wasn't like excited to talk about this, but like I found myself being like, I'm suddenly very passionate about this thing. So you got a little bit of the fire tonight, guys. A little bit of the fire. I said all of that because I fully admit I don't really have anything prepared yet for next week, but by next week I'll have like 5 episodes because I'll realize I need to like
come up with some new topics.
Come up with some topics. So we will definitely be talking to you about something next week,
which is a great plug to think like our audience. Tell us what you want to hear. We're always open for topic ideas. You can always tell us. We'll devote an entire show to your thought if it's a good one. So
we have been doing this for like 260 episodes though. So like, if you can come up with a topic that we haven't covered in some like way, shape, or form, not saying that we've covered everything, but if you can come up with like an actual unique topic, you will get like all the praise. Like we'll send you a t-shirt, whatever. Like I'll pay for it. Like let's do it. Like I will get you a t-shirt. There's my challenge. There's Penguin's challenge. If you can come up with a topic that both excites me enough to talk about it, and also we haven't like covered a large like aspect of it, then like, and I'm gonna get hit with something obvious. I'm gonna get hit over the head with something that's like, you haven't covered this yet.
Like, oh yeah.
Dang it, here's your t-shirt. Here's your low-hanging fruit t-shirt. So, all right, there it is. There's the challenge.
So with that,
see you next week.
We'll see you next week.